You guys are really going to regret picking this one. Wublin Island is an absolute behemoth of an island to talk about in situations like this. It may not have the most monsters ever, but the varying quality among them is so polarizing that it takes just forever to talk about everything. For this video, there isn't going to be a top and bottom 3, instead it's going to be a top and bottom 5. Yeah, strap in, this is gonna take a while. Also, we're gonna start with the top 5 this time because of the way the island was created. I think it'll be better for the viewing experience this way. Number 5 is a really unique monster, Screamoo. This monster has so much personality in its voice and animations, it's insane. The vocal performance just has this twinge to it that works so well in the song. It's honestly shocking how much better this vocal is compared to every other monster in MSM as a whole. The effort in it is just staggering. Another thing that goes in favor of Screamoo is how the dual layering on the voice works. I don't usually talk about soundtrack versions of the MSM songs in these videos simply because this is about in-game content. But if you want to hear how much Screamoo's second voice adds, go listen to Wublin Island soundtrack version on YouTube. It is so worth it. In 4th place, we have the best vocal on the island in my personal and also the group consensus opinion. It may shock a few people, but it's actually Dermot of all monsters. It's a little amazing when you think about the fact that an atonal monster is ranking higher than one with tone. It just is that good. Dermot is just so well made, I don't even know where to begin. The speed and rhythm it has works so well when paired with Brump that it just makes me happy. Above all that is the fact that its voice has just the perfect amount of raspiness, and the deep quality gives it that extra bit of oomph to make it stand out in the best possible way. In 3rd place, we have one that people honestly may think is a little too low, but, you know, there's a lot of competition on the island. Poke. Yeah, we're getting into the magnum opus territory. These 3 monsters are straight up some of the best things BBB has ever done. Poke, being one of the original 5, gave it a lot of time to imprint itself into the minds of everyone in the community, and over time it just aged like a fine wine. The sound of Poke is so intricate and complex that the only way I can think to describe it is frenzied. It works surprisingly fantastically when paired with Screamoo. I just can't sing praise of its composition enough. That's really all there is to Poke. No matter what you talk about, it always comes back to how amazing the composition is. 2nd place is where things start to get difficult. This monster and the 1st place ones are both really impressive achievements for BBB, and either of them could easily be number 1, but for now we're giving 2nd place to Giger. Firstly, because I don't want to sound like a broken record for this entire thing, Giger's composition is literal music to my ears. I shouldn't have to explain why this is so. Anyone with a sense of musical intuition can hear why, so we'll move on. When they were creating Giger, they had a very important question that needed to be answered. Do they use an alto, or do they use a tenor sax? Well, someone at BBB is an absolute genius because they said that they should use both, and holy does it work! The tone between its 2 tracks are drastically different, and the way they just slide in to pair with other monsters in those verses is perfect in both cases. All in all, an amazing monster sound, one I always just love to listen to. 1st place is probably without question one of the best things BBB has ever done musically, which is good because they poured all of this amazing music talent into the most important element of an electro swing song like this, the walk. First off, real bass. That's important. Using a real deal bass adds so much natural reverb and texture to the track, and holy moly Stromboli does it work wonders on its own. Even if that alone was done, this monster would already be amazing, but they took it a step further by making its composition so absolutely mesmerizingly amazing that I can hardly handle it. For a base monster, it has a surprising amount of melody in its tracks that when paired with other monsters is just the perfect amount of sound. A perfect example of this would be in the opening with Giger. Those two pair together just beautifully. Pretty much everything about Thlock just screams creativity, down to the smallest details on the design. Go watch a Wublin Island video and pay attention to the pegs on Thlock's face. And notice how they always turn to match whatever note they're playing. That is such a small, unneeded detail, but they added it anyway because they just wanted to put that much extra care into Thlock. I could gush about this monster for hours and still find new things to say, but unfortunately, we're gonna have to move on eventually, so let's just end with this fact. Thlock may not be my favorite monster ever, but it is absolutely what I consider to be one of the best in the entire game. Honorable mentions go to the following monsters. Like Plant Island, every single of the original 15 make this island perfect, ranking it as one of the highest ones in the game. And before you say anything, yes, Wubbox is part of the original 15. It is labeled as 15 in the code and was planned before the last 5 as told by both the trailer and the tutorial. So, everything at this point makes Wublin Island seem like the best island we've done so far, and to an extent you'd be correct. The island's original concept is wildly better and above the other islands by a very large margin, with a few exceptions. However, that was before they started adding to it. The bottom 5 are very predictable at this point in MSM's life, since most people will agree that song-wise these additions are completely destroying the entire song in terms of structure. It honestly is to the point where this isn't even a bottom 5. Instead, it's a collective number 1. But that's boring, so we're going to do a bottom 5 anyway, and arguably the best of the 5 in the bottom is Mulch, whose minimal addition saves it from harming the song too much. Not only that, but the vocal performance is very well done. The raspy and gargled voice works well in the song and on the monster. And now to the bad part, which is its placement. Mulch makes the horrifying, terrible, no good, very bad decision of attempting to cover up Waji, one of the most important vocals for the tone of the song. That single placement issue is a deal breaker when it comes to this monster, since you're covering up a melody vocal with an atonal one. At least with Brump and Dermot, both of them are atonal in nature, so the pairing they have works wonders. Basically, Mulch's harm to the song is entirely its placement, and it doesn't have to do with the sound, which is why it's high. Second of the pointless 5 list is Fleechworm. I feel like a ton of people give this monster a lot more flack than it really deserves. Its sound isn't the worst of the 5, and it plays just barely enough to not get grating. However, I can still agree that this thing is probably one of the most disappointing monsters. Teasing the silhouette was probably a mistake for Fleechworm in particular with how they chose to take the design, since it was kind of a bait and switch for a lot of people and it left some disappointed. Only other things that are notable to mention is how Fleechworm's sound is an instrumental loop, which is a lot worse than a drum loop. I can forgive BBB for using drum loops a lot since sometimes it leads to monsters like Timpa and Drumroll, which are both amazing, but there isn't really an excuse for using an instrumental one. Third, we got Astropod, who's just overly really boring. He's more boring than my freaking tone in these videos. To keep with the trend of saying the good stuff first, I'll admit that out of the 5, Astropod has the best design. And to be honest, in terms of all Wublins, its design still ranks really high. The color choices and implementation of body parts is really well executed, making it visually a really good monster. However, anything related to the sound is where Astropod falls off hard. Biggest issue is how boring the sound is, mixed with how repetitive it is as well. Like Fleechworm, Astropod's sound is an instrumental loop, but here's the thing. Fleechworm's is a 4-bar loop, and Astropod's is a 1-bar loop. It gets so repetitive that eventually it just drowns out into pure noise, which is terrible for any song. Oh boy, this is gonna make so many people mad. Second on the list is one people seem to really like for some reason, Pixelotl. My biggest issue with this monster is that it plays way too often, making so many verses sound exactly the same. This overabundance of placings quickly changes Pixelotl from an endearing monster to just a plain annoying one. Second issue is that Pixelotl's sound is very repetitive even on its own, being similar 5-note structured melody mixed with some flourished notes to change it ever so slightly. Basically, everything about Pixelotl's song is annoying, repetitive, and just not pleasing at all. The third issue is the design and how it doesn't fit with Wublin Island at all. The island consists of all these huge, disgusting monsters that shouldn't exist, and then you just got this little axolotl that is gamer. In last place is a pretty depressing monster to place here. The design and idea behind it is so amazing on its own. The sound is really cool as well, but it's one of those cases where once you add it to the song, it falls apart in the most disappointing way. It is of course the duo of Bona and Petite. Now, for most of the time in these videos, a lot of this needs to be taken with a pinch of salt since it can be boiled down to an opinion shared amongst a common group. But I truly think that this is a universal fact that Bon Appetit sounds terrible in Wublin Island. I can understand if you'd like the design of the two, but if you say that the sound is good in the song, then you're actually just plain out wrong. One large issue with the song is just that it is way too bass boosted, making it overpowering against a lot of others. It gets to a point where at the very beginning of the song, literally the first verse, it's completely unlistenable. Later in the song it becomes a bit more bearable simply because the rhythm itself is good, but that leads to the second biggest issue. This monster does not pair at all with other percussions, especially drum roll. They pair about 3 times in the song and the percussive line becomes literally like beat and a quarter beat ahead of each other, and it becomes just one more case of noise. It's just noise. Although the reason these are all a possible first place is because combined they make the song completely white noise, putting it from one of the best islands in the game to one of the worst. Dishonorable mentions include Zinth, Blipsqueak, and Scargo. These monsters from the original 15 add the least to the song overall, at least in this version. In the original version, with the original 15, these were all perfectly serviceable monsters, but with the Pointless 5, they just get drowned out really hard. Well, that's Wublin Island, one of the most controversial islands to talk about. The best elements of this island are straight up some of the best things MSM has to offer, with monsters like Thwack and Giger being extra impressive. However, the last editions have completely destroyed the overall song. Wublin Island is my personal favorite island in the game based on song and concept, but in the state they left it in, I can't look past how much of a loss it is all around. It's really depressing since you have all of these absolutely amazing performances and they're completely shadowed since the worst parts are just so loud and unnecessary. Hopefully you enjoyed this very long run through of Wublin Island. Considering this is 4th episode, I think you guys got a little spoiled. Next time, let's try for a smaller island maybe, possibly a Dawn of Fire song since we haven't touched that game yet, and not Starhenge, because that would take even longer. That's pretty much it for this video. I'll see you all in the next one. It really pains me to do this. Wublin Island is the second worst island in the entire game. If this was the original 15, it'd be all the way up here. Literally, without question. We would have to rename this tier to Wublin. But with the bottom 5 being so unneeded and bad, second worst in the game. I'm really sorry, guys. I know a lot of people like this one, but that's just how it is.